What's going on, man? Welcome back to the basement. I'm Ron, and we spent all offseason talking about the running back dead zone being this area from rounds 3 through 6 where we want to be fading the running backs. Now, on the flip side of that, we want to be targeting the wide receivers in this area from rounds 3 through 6. And my favorite wide receiver archetype to draft in the dead zone are young, ascending wide receivers in their first 3 seasons. So last year we had Jamar Chase, Deebo Samuel, T. Higgins, Hollywood Brown, Deontay Johnson, all smashed. Before 2021, you even had Calvin Ridley year 3, Metcalf in year 2, A.J. Brown rookie and second year, Godwin year 3. I believe DJ Moore was great in his second year. Tyreek Hill was great in his second year. Stephon Diggs had a year 3 blow up. You have a lot of guys. Kenny Golladay is another one that blow up in their first 3 seasons, and you can get some great discounts on young wide receiver breakout profiles because people want to see it before they draft it. And I think that's one of the worst ways to play fantasy football. The way that you come out here and get massive wins is you lean into uncertainty, get the discount, and then absolutely smash. Because you have a guy like last year, Jamar Chase. Let's say you don't draft him and you want to see it first. Well, Jamar Chase was a 5th-round pick last year, and now if you ever want to roster Jamar Chase on your fantasy team, you have to pay a top 5 pick. You're cutting the profit margins pretty thin because Jamar Chase, it is likely that until he's past his age apex, past his prime, we never see him that cheap ever again without some kind of crazy injury outside, circumstance. But Jamar Chase was the cheapest that he ever was last year, and we want to get these breakout wide receivers at their cheapest price possible before they break out. So with that being said, we're going to talk through 7 wide receivers you need to draft in 2022 before they break out. We're not going to waste any time. If you enjoyed the video at any point, make sure you get down below, subscribe, leave a like. Let's go.
Thirsty, trying to choose. I know I'm pretty cool. My nitty babe.
Now, fellas, strap in. I have timestamps on this video, so if you don't want to hear the whole spiel, you can jump ahead and just get to the players. But I want to talk about why I like wide receivers in their first 3 seasons. And the first thing is that we get a massive discount on uncertainty because, again, fantasy gamers want to see it first before they draft young players. But you're cutting yourself off from the cheapest price you could possibly get on a stud. We just talked about Jamar Chase, but I think another good example here is Allen Robinson, where he is one of the most decorated active wide receivers. He has multiple wide receiver 1 seasons. And if we look back over his entire career since he was drafted in 2014, we only have best ball data back to 2015. But his second year in 2015 remains his highest win rate season while also being the cheapest that Allen Robinson has ever been since 2015. He was picked around pick 61 in 2015. He returned a 15% win rate. He has never been cheaper since then. Even this year, in a year where A-Rob is coming off of his worst year of his career, he's still a 4th-round pick. You are never getting access to 6th-round Allen Robinson like you were in his second year since that breakout. So what we want is we want to pinpoint where we can find these players early on to get the cheapest possible season that player ever has. We want to find the next Allen Robinson before he's already a top 3-round pick. That's why I really don't understand this idea of I want to see it first. Because if you must see it first with every wide receiver, with every player, you're not getting a ton of profit. You have to lean into uncertainty sometimes because that's where the biggest upside lies. You have to remember, you can't really play. I think I've seen comments, Ron, you should really be playing things safer. Like, you don't have any running back depth on this team. Even in a 12-man or even in a 10-man redraft league, you need a 90th to 92nd percentile outcome to win. It's still a 1 in 10, 1 in 12 chance. You can't just, conservatively make your way to the championship. Some things really have to break right for you, and that's why I do swing for upside. Most of the prizes that in the leagues that I play in are all skewed till first place or for first place. That is the spot that I'm gunning for. I don't just want to consistently make the playoffs in every single league and just hope that things break right. Now, the next thing I wanted to look at was we have data from Peter Howard telling us when wide receivers usually break out. And this is really cool because we can really pinpoint what breakout years we want to be targeting. And here we see that percentage of top 5 and top 12 seasons, wide receivers hit those in their first 2 to 3 years. So you have year 1, about 5.3% of wide receivers hit their first top 5 season in year 1, 13.2% in year for top 12 in year 1. Once you get to year 2, year 3, that's where most breakouts are happening. And this is pretty obvious, right? Where if a wide receiver is ever going to hit a top 5 or top 12 season, it's probably going to happen earlier than late. But it is nice to be able to pinpoint them where if a wide receiver hasn't hit a top 12 season by year 4 plus, it's probably okay to fade them at cost. But year 2 and year 3 is where we can lean into that uncertainty and get access to wide receivers where they break out. Because if a wide receiver is going to break out and have a monster year, the first time that they do it is usually going to be early on. So the parameters for these breakout wide receivers today, where we want to come out here, draft them early, get that early adopter benefit, early adopter profit. We're going to talk about wide receivers who don't have top 12 seasons yet in points per game. They're valued outside the top 12 wide receivers in ADP, and they're in their first 3 seasons. Now, we've been talking about a lot of these guys in the offseason or all offseason, but I wanted to make an official video of 7 wide receivers that I am confident comparatively to their ADP, that they're good bets to break out in 2022. And the first wide receiver we're going to talk about, Jaylen Waddle. He is going off the board. By the way, we're going to have the underdog ADP on the screen so you guys can see not only the underdog ADP, but you can also see what my exposure is. All of these players I have 10% plus exposure on. The average exposure is 1 divided by 12, so 8.3%. So I am really high on all of these players. And Jaylen Waddle goes on underdog at an ADP of 402. And before we even break down Jaylen Waddle, I want to let y'all know, make sure you check out Underdog. Use promo code RON when you sign up if you are new to Underdog. I will have a link in the description. I'll have a link down below. I get this question all the time. Ron, when's the best time to draft? Should we be drafting right now? Do you think the WrestleMania 3 winner has already been drafted? This is a great chart by Michael Dubner over at RotoViz, and it shows right now, late August is the best time to go out there and draft your underdog teams. As we can see here, advance rate over expectation is the highest in late August. I am drafting 150 Best Ball Mania 3 teams. I've only done 75 so far. I am saving all of my entries for right now. I have been grinding out entries. I'm trying to get this last 75 done over these next 2 weeks, so I'm really hammering them home during the most profitable spot of the season. So again, if you're new to Underdog, right now is the best time to come out here and draft. They're doing fun drafts all the time with the Pomeranian, the puppy, all of that good stuff. So if you want to hop on there, play best ball. You don't have to manage the leagues, and it's a great way to go in there and get ready for your home leagues because the ADP is much sharper than your home league. So you'll see, Waddle, he's going at pick 402 in here. Maybe in your home league that he'll slip to like the late 4th or he'll slip even to the early 5th. So again, make sure you use promo code RON when you sign up for Underdog, and they will match your deposit up to $100. So when we talk about Waddle, he goes off the board at the 402 as the wide receiver 17. In my rankings, he's my 307 as the wide receiver 14. So I'm about a little over half a round higher, and I have him 3 wide receiver spots higher. I'm going to be honest with you guys. I was expecting to come into this year and not even be high on Jaylen Waddle. He was somebody that I wasn't really even thinking we were going to be high on, but as you guys can see, 14.7% exposure is a lot. Almost double the implied of 8.3%. And this is what it came down to. I thought his ADP was going to be like CeeDee Lamb's last year, and maybe if Tyreek Hill didn't come to the Dolphins, it would have, where instead of him being a 3-4 turn pick here, he would have been a 2-3 turn pick, and then at that point, I'm good. I will take the A.J. Browns of the world, the T. Higgins of the world, but those guys are all gone by the time we're looking at Waddle. And then the other part of Waddle that I didn't really love is his profile, or his production profile, where he's sort of Jarvis and Landry-esque, where he caught 100 passes, only had 1,015 yards and 7 touchdowns as the wide receiver 15 in points per game. Now, don't get me wrong, wide receiver 15 in points per game is amazing for a rookie, but we would like to see more efficiency. We don't want a Jarvis Landry where they're just going to stockpile and compile receptions and not really do much else. But we can look at the efficiency. 42nd in yards per out run, really bad last year. But I'm open to the idea that Jaylen Waddle can improve upon that, because I don't think, if you look at the guy who Jarvis Landry was in college and the guy who Jaylen Waddle was in college, very different archetypes. Where Jarvis Landry was almost, he played with Odell Beckham, and he was almost like a bruiser, where he was this physical, not super athletic. He didn't really do that well in the combine. I want to say maybe he ran like the 4.6s, but he's this like slow, tough technician. Waddle's a little more finesse than that, and he's much faster than that. And if we look last year, he got healthier as the year went on. If you guys remember, he had a pretty bad injury at Bama. Took him out the entire year. I think he tried to play in the national championship game, but started hobbling and couldn't really play. So I think that affected him a little bit for the early part of last year. Then we had in week 12 last year, he clocked in the 7th fastest ball carrier speed at 21.8 miles per hour. And I think that Waddle is electric enough as a playmaker. He was electric at college. If you guys remember, there was that one play where I still remember watching it to this day, but it was Burrow's LSU versus, I believe Tua was still healthy at that point, but like Burrow's LSU versus Tua's Alabama. And Waddle returns a punt, gets his face mask ripped like 180 degrees, like he could have snapped his neck. He spins out of it and just takes the punt return to the house. Like, he is very dynamic. So I am shocked that he wasn't more efficient last year, but I don't think that means he can't be efficient going forward, because we know efficiency is not super sticky year to year. And if we go back to his college days, Waddle was an efficiency monster at Alabama. Last year, Cooper Kupp was the only wide receiver who had above a 3 yards per out run in the NFL. Waddle's career average at Alabama yard per out run was 3.57. The last 2 wide receiver ones that we have in the last 2 draft classes, Jamar Chase, his career average yards per out run is 3.12. In London's is 2.32. Waddle outshoots both of those by a lot. We also look at the NFL again. Debo is the only wide receiver in the NFL who had above a 10 yards after catch per reception. Waddle cleared that mark in 2 out of 3 of his seasons at Alabama, so averaging over 10 yards per yak. And his career average was 9.8. So in college, he was hyper efficient, playmaker in space. I don't think it would be that crazy for him to transfer that over into the NFL, where Waddle already did the hard part. He earned volume. He had a higher target per route run as a true rookie than Keenan Allen, T. Higgins, Michael Pittman, Hollywood Brown, CeeDee Lamb, McLaurin. Again, as a true rookie. So all we need now, we see that he can command targets. All we need now is for him to provide some efficiency, which again, I think is well within his range. He did it in college. He has Tyreek Hill to take some coverage away. He has Mike McDaniels to come out here and scheme up a good offense. So Waddle, to me, is a middle to early 3rd round pick. And there are a lot of places right now where he is going to fall to the 4th round, and he is a smash in the 4th round for me. Now, the next guy we're going to talk about is Amon-Ra St. Brown, the Sun God. And his ADP right now is the 509 as the wide receiver 29. I have him as my 503 as my wide receiver 28. So it's really not that far off, right? 503 versus 509, wide receiver 29 versus wide receiver 28. The reason my exposure is so high is because early on in the offseason, that was not the case. He was like a 6th round guy at some point. I think it's maybe the Hard Knocks hype or whatever, but it started to drive his price back up. Even still, 5th round, I am completely fine with him. And the arguments that come out against Amon-Ra St. Brown are heinous. I'll use that word, heinous. Let's look at it real quick. Amon-Ra St. Brown, from weeks 13 through 18, he averaged 33% target share, 11 targets per game over that span. He was the wide receiver 2 in points per game in all of fantasy, as a rookie wide receiver on the Detroit Lions, averaging 25 points per game. That's mind-boggling. Like, that is an insane stat line to even read off. And the first counter to that is always going to be, and I'm sure that there's like 20% of you guys out there in your head, you know, you got steam coming out of your ears. Well, you know, Hawkinson and Swift, you know, they were hurt during that stretch. Hawkinson and Swift are coming back. DJ Chark's going to come back. No way he repeats that. And I agree. We know that. We know he's not going to come out here and repeat that. If we were expecting a 33% target share on 25 points per game, I'd have him as my 106. Instead, we're drafting him as the wide receiver 29. Terry McLaurin was the wide receiver 29 last year in points per game with 12.6 points per game. Is it that crazy to take this last stretch of games where he flashed elite 25-plus point per game upside as a true rookie with a 33% target share and make a bet that he can outshoot 12.6 points per game? Again, not a single soul is penciling him in the projections for 25 points per game and a 30% target share. But I don't see how, after what he flashed last year, that he's not a special talent in some way and that he doesn't have the upside for 15-plus points per game on like a 23 to 25% target share. Is that not a happy medium that's in the range of outcomes? Also, yes, Amon-Ra St. Brown is going to have more competition, but why can't he emerge as the league target earner? He had a 21% target share last year as a true rookie, which is elite. That was higher than CeeDee Lamb had as a rookie. I want to say that was higher than what T. Higgins had as a rookie. It's an elite number, 21% target share. That matches or exceeds the career highs of DeAndre Swift, TJ Hawkinson, or DJ Chark. So if Amon-Ra St. Brown can match the career highs of those 3 players as a true rookie, I don't understand why it's so crazy to assume that Amon-Ra St. Brown can be the lead option in this offense and lead the team in targets. Now, he also didn't just produce in our fantasy land, but he also put up an elite PFF grade on film, where this is a great stat from Dynasty_IM. I know him, Bean Counter, I use PFF grade as well. It is one of the most strong indicators for young wide receivers. And he is one of 5 day 3 rookie wide receivers in the PFF era to put up a 15% or better target share and a 78 or better receiving grade. The other 4 wide receivers, Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs, Marcus Colston, Doug Baldwin. The talent is there. Again, I cannot stress this enough. No one is expecting a repeat of what he did last season. He is not going to be a 25-point-per-game guy. They are bringing in more competition, but the competition is not so stiff that he cannot return on a wide receiver 29 price tag. That is all it comes down to. He flashed enough upside for me want to buy in on that profile. I also like the way that this Lions team is trending. This offense is going to score more points. The offensive line is better. PFF has them as their 3rd-ranked O-line right now, which is really, really good. The wide receivers are better. They're going to have Chark that'll actually take some things out over the top where Amon-Ra St. Brown can come underneath and really get some targets in that way. Wide receiver, the whole offense is better. It's going to be 2nd year in the offense with Jared Goff. Goff is already used to targeting a slot wide receiver when he had Cooper Kupp on his Rams. I think the fit just makes a ton of sense. Amon-Ra St. Brown has a really nice year 2 breakout type profile. Now, the next guy I want to talk about, who we probably should have talked about before Amon-Ra St. Brown because he goes earlier than him. I wanted this to be in order of ADP, but now I don't care. Jerry Jeudy. He's going off the board as the 408, as the wide receiver 22. I even have him high in my rankings as the 310 as my wide receiver 17. I am really high on Jerry Jeudy. I have him on 14.7% of my teams. I already have him on, I want to say, 1 or 2 of my redraft managed leagues. I've done 4 at this point. I love Jeudy, man. As much as I have been on this channel, if any of you guys out there are OGs, you guys know, in the Dynasty space, I haven't been huge on Jeudy. But in redraft, I think he's really good and slept on here. Now, I will say, I have him as my 310 because his ADP is like almost a 5th-round guy here, and you can get him to fall to the 5th. I don't think I would ever take Jeudy in the 3rd, but it would be extremely tough where if my 101 through 309 got taken out, I'd be staring Jeudy in the face. I have a really big tier break before that where I think I have like the Judys, Keenan Allens, Mike Williams of the world. There's a really big tier break late 3rd, but you can sometimes get people to reach on running backs and stuff, so you don't have to take a Jeudy in the 3rd round. But in a vacuum, if his ADP was 310 and that was his price, I'd be paying it. And what it comes down to with Jeudy is he had the underlying target earning numbers that we want. And now he gets transplanted from an offense with Drew Lock and Teddy Bridgewater to an offense with Russell Wilson. He is going to lead an offense that is going to be efficient, high scoring. They're going to be in the AFC West where there's going to be a lot of shootouts. It reminds me a ton of Chris Godwin with Jameis in year 3 and Calvin Ridley with Matt Ryan in year 3. It reminds me a lot of those 2 scenarios. And I'm not saying that he is a shoe-in to be the next year 3 breakout, but if I had to put my money on the next year 3 breakout, that would break out in the way that Debo did last year, Ridley before him, Godwin before him. Gun to my head, my money is on Jerry Jeudy. And last year is tough to have some real takeaways from. He suffered a high ankle sprain, which are really, really tough to get back from. I remember Alvin Kamara had a high ankle sprain the year before his 6 touchdown Christmas game or whatever. The year before that, he was kind of a disappointment where he had a high ankle sprain, was dealing with that all season. It's a really tough injury, high ankle sprains. Before suffering the high ankle sprain, it was around halftime of week 1. He already had 7 targets, 6 catches, and 72 yards at half. He was going crazy. Then he gets hurt. But when we look back to year 1, the signal he showed in year 1 was extremely promising, where he earns targets, he gets open. He was 4th among rookie wide receivers in 2020 with a 21.36% targets per out run, higher than T. Higgins, higher than CeeDee Lamb. Truly think he's a similar caliber talent that was just stuck in a bad situation this entire time. Now, you guys know, I love T. Higgins. Don't love CeeDee Lamb, but I have them both as top 5 dynasty wide receivers. And I don't think it is insane to say both of those guys have top 24 finishes by now. CD does not have a top 12 point per game finish, I don't think. T. Higgins does. I don't think it's wild that if you just played roulette with these three and you had Jeudy end up on the Cowboys or the Bengals, I'd be shocked. If you put Jeudy on the Cowboys or the Bengals and you give him 2 years of clean health, I don't know how he doesn't finish with at least one top 24 season. I don't think that on a talent basis, he really is that far off of these two. You guys might kill me for saying this, but I really don't think he's really all that off. In terms of earning targets, getting open, the skills that I look for, Jeudy has shown that he's really good at that. He's just been in bad spots this entire time. Now, we look at his reception perception. This is from his rookie year. 81st percentile winner against man, 71st percentile winner against press. And something that is really important to note is all of these guys out here. And I hate bringing up Sutton when I bring up Jeudy because I do just want to break down Jeudy. But there is a Sutton part of the equation because every time you bring up Jeudy, someone else is going to bring up Sutton. Sutton's better. He's the clear one, whatever. And people want to paint Jeudy as this boring slot wide receiver where Courtland Sutton, he's the deep threat. He has a high ADOT. Jeudy is more of this slot wide receiver. This reception perception data suggests he's actually better at winning on the perimeter, right? If you look into the reception perception archives, zone winners, zone beaters are for slot guys. So Cooper Kupp is going to have a really good win percent or success rate against zone. Same thing with like a Deebo Samuel. Jeudy, the numbers show here that he's actually better against man and press, which would say that he should play on the outside. Now, he's going to play slot. I mean, there's actually a chance in a 3 wide receiver sets we see KJ Hamler kick inside. I do believe that KJ Hamler last year before his injury was actually playing a lot of slot snaps, either in the preseason or something like that. But Judy's going to play on the outside. He's going to play on the inside. He's not just a boring slot wide receiver. He can do it all. He can play on the outside. And that's this narrative that annoys me because you have last year where Teddy Bridgewater's the quarterback. It brought Judy's ADOT down, and it makes Jeudy seem like this boring slot wide receiver, low ADOT guy, where he needs like a Teddy Bridgewater type guy. That's the only reason why he was better than Sutton. And the issue is that Jeudy was just simply adapting to that situation. And we see this reflected in ADP. This is why I feel so strongly about it. I'm a big Jeudy guy. I have Jeudy as my 310 wide receiver. What did I say? Wide receiver 17. Here's the thing. I'm not even so much negative against Courtland Sutton. I have Courtland Sutton as my 311 as my wide receiver 18. I have them back to back in the rankings. I just think that it is egregious for the market here to have Courtland Sutton a whole 10 picks ahead of Jeudy in 6 wide receiver spots. Wide receiver 16 versus wide receiver 22. The market is far too certain. Even me, as somebody who prefers Jeudy versus Sutton, I'd say it's, 55% chance that Jeudy outscores Sutton in points per game? I couldn't imagine being that sure. We haven't seen Russ in this offense, and we're making a lot of assumptions here, where Jeudy is seen, again, he's seen as this low ADOT slot guy. His career average depth of target, Jerry Jeudy, is 13.2. DK Metcalf's career average depth of target, 13.1. Sutton's career average is 14.4. So Sutton does go even further downfield, but Jeudy is still operating in the same area as a Metcalf, and he's still operating past the first down markers. So this idea that Jeudy doesn't benefit from Russ because he's going to be a more low ADOT guy, I think that's lazy analysis. I think both Sutton and Jeudy are going to benefit from Russ. He's one of the best guys at throwing the football. I just don't get this idea that Sutton gets the boost and Jeudy gets nothing. Russ can support 2 top 24 options. He's done it with Lockett and Metcalf the last 2 to 3 years. They both finished in the top 24 in 2 straight seasons in a low volume environment. There should be a little bit more pass attempts here. I just don't get it. Again, it's not to say that I don't like Sutton. I just think the market is far too sure, especially when we look at Jeudy and he has a mouth-watering year 3 breakout type profile. Next guy we're going to talk about, Elijah Moore. He's going off the board as the 606, as the wide receiver 32. I have him about a round and some change ahead of that as my 502 as my wide receiver 27. And he's another darling of this channel, like Jeudy, that we've discussed multiple times. He's on 24.4% of my teams. And this one makes no sense to me. He had 12.6 points per game last year as the wide receiver 28 as a rookie, but is being priced as the wide receiver 32 on Underdog. And I know it's not that cut and dry. I don't know why I said draw. But it's mind-boggling to me considering what we know about year 2 to 3 breakouts. If Elijah Moore was ever going to break out in a big way, it's going to be soon. That is what the data shows. If Elijah Moore is going to come out here and break out in a big way, which the Dynasty market is backing Elijah Moore, where he's like a top 18 wide receiver in Dynasty, again, it's going to happen either this year or next year. So with this in mind, Elijah Moore finished as wide receiver 28 last year. It wouldn't be that crazy for him to be expected to break the top 24 wide receivers this year, not take a step back. And I know the Jets are trash. I know Zach Wilson can't support him, whatever everybody wants to say. But here's the issue. He was the wide receiver 28 last year, despite being on a bottom 5 scoring offense, catching passes from Mike White, Zach Wilson, and Josh Johnson, all while being a part-time player. This is something that people don't understand. Elijah Moore wasn't even a starter last year. He only played over 75% of the snaps, 6 out of his 11 games. And in his 4 games where he played 80% or more of the snaps, he averaged 15 points per game. Waddle was the wide receiver 15 last year on 15.4 points per game. Elijah Moore was a firm wide receiver 2 when given the snaps. I think it would be absolutely insane for him not to be given more snaps this year. Of course, they love him in camp. He is the wide receiver 1 on the depth chart at this point. He's going to have more snaps, and I think that he really just might be a Terry McLaurin type guy. It's going to be wild to say a DeAndre Hopkins, but a guy who can be somewhat quarterback-proof, where they're just so undeniable that they go out there and at least like a Terry McLaurin and give you a wide receiver 2 season, even with bad quarterback play. And I think that's a median outcome for Elijah Moore. Now, again, his situation was garbage. He wasn't playing a starter's worth of snaps, and even then, he was a fringe wide receiver 2 in points per game as the wide receiver 28. If the situation is still garbage, he should still improve just from an individual standpoint, because we know year 2 jumps happen. He's going to get better as a player, and he's going to get an increase in route participation. So what he doesn't gain from a better situation, he's gaining from an individual standpoint. And when we look at an individual standpoint, he's really, really solid. He dominated reception perception as a true rookie. He came out here. Hold on, wrong one. Here it is. He dominates all 3 levels. He dominates man, 81st percentile against man, 76th percentile against zone, 70th percentile against press. That is a early career Deontay Johnson type reception perception, where he can beat every type of coverage and he can play everywhere. Reception perception sampled his snaps or whatever. He played 29.9% of his snaps from the slot, 72.3% on the outside as the X wide receiver, and he put up those numbers, those success rates. And at 5'9", 178 pounds, that's extremely encouraging, because he's not only just a slot guy, but he can play on the perimeter. And what that also means that he can play out there on 2 wide receiver sets. You get all of this momentum coming forward for Elijah Moore, where he's this really talented player, had a great target per route run. He looks really good. And I get the offense is discouraging. I get that we just had Zach Wilson go down and Joe Flacco might play some games. But I think even if the Jets suck, he can pay off. And if the Jets miraculously, again, we aren't perfect at predicting things. What if the Jets right now, their offense is being priced that they're going to be like a bottom 5 unit? If they just come out here in like the 20th ranked offense, most of these Jets players pay off just because of this pessimism, where they're getting priced so low to the floor that you don't even need them to be a top 10 offense for things to go right. All you need is, like, if the Jets come out here in like the 21st ranked points per game offense, 21st offensive DOA, things pay off. Next guy we're going to talk about is Garrett Wilson. Figured we'd knock the 2 Jets wide receivers out. And I swear to you guys, if you look at my exposures from last year, I was not a Jet guy. I was not drafting a ton of Corey Davis. I was not drafting a ton of Zach Wilson. I was not drafting a ton of Michael Carter. I am not somebody that is a homer. I am really, really pessimistic towards my Jets. I truly believe that the market just has Garrett Wilson and Elijah Moore wrong. These are the 2 guys that are the highest exposure players for me on Underdog. You can look at my exposures from last year. I did not have a Jet player over like 10%. So this is the same spot where the offense is a concern, but need I remind you, we just saw a Detroit Lions rookie wide receiver be last season's league winner at the end of the year. And this is why we target rookie wide receivers. They start slow, they earn starter routes, and then they crutch down the stretch in the playoffs, like we saw with Jamar Chase, like we saw with Amon-Ra St. Brown. It happens every single year, and Wilson is grossly mispriced. Again, he is going off the board as the 1009 as the wide receiver 54. In my rankings, I have him 3 rounds ahead of consensus. I have him as my 703 as my wide receiver 42. This is a top 10 drafted wide receiver. Last year, at pick like 100, 117-ish, that's where like the Rondale Moores, Elijah Moores, Terrace Marshalls of the world went. Garrett Wilson was drafted in the top 10 in the NFL draft, and I understand the situation is a slight concern, or even if it's a big concern. But at a certain point, you have to just draft for talent, especially in these later rounds. And when we look at top 10 wide receivers over the last like 3-4 years, I will say there haven't been top 10 wide receivers drafted outside of just the last 2. But we have 5 wide receivers over the last 3 years drafted in the top 10. And Wilson is on track to be the latest selected of the bunch. We had Waddle last year go pick 115. Garrett Wilson is going behind that at pick 117. All three of these wide receivers, between Ja'Marr Chase, Jaylen Waddle, even Devonta Smith, who didn't have a great year last year, all finished above an 8.3% win rate. Chase and Waddle were league winners. That is in the cards for Garrett Wilson. It's so important sometimes to just bet on the talent. Last year, right, these guys all balled out. Tua was in year 2. Nobody thought he was going to be great. Same thing with Jalen Hurts. Even if you like Jalen Hurts in fantasy, you didn't think that he was going to support some wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2. Sometimes we're just wrong. We don't know how the NFL shakes out. Some players they outperform expectations. One thing that's constant is a player's talent. Garrett Wilson is more talented than an ADP of a 10th round pick in redraft. He should really be priced more like a 7th, 8th, 9th round pick. And just off principle, when you can draft a top 10 NFL draft pick at wide receiver with a solid profile, you simply just have to. These are his comps that spit out in my database. Now, this is a lot to take in. The first thing is prospect info. So that's just, what round, where did they get drafted, when. Prospect here is elite. Elite wide receivers, I believe, have a 75% hit rate of hitting top 24 seasons at some point in their career. Then my RS grades, which is my prospect model, which gives them a score out of 10. And then I have their comps, where I assign them grades, or the database assigns them grades from film, production, age profile, athleticism, and it spits that all out. And this is what Garrett Wilson looks like as a prospect. He has comps of DeAndre Hopkins, Devontae Adams, Mike Evans, Brandon Cooks, A.J. Brown. Jonathan Baldwin is really the only miss on this list. It wouldn't shock me in the slightest if Garrett Wilson ended up being a fun fantasy wide receiver this season, wins leagues. It's all in the range. I just, again, I am baffled that somebody that is a top 10 draft pick in the NFL draft would be going this low. He's even going lower than a guy like Treylon Burks. He's going lower than Sky Moore. He's going lower than Chris Olave. I don't know how he's not seen in the same tier as those guys. Next guy we're going to talk about, Brandon Aiyuk. He's going at the 6'10 as the wide receiver 34. My rankings, he's the 6'07 as the wide receiver 35. So there's really not a big discrepancy there. But that was because at one point I was way higher on market on Aiyuk because he was like an 8th round pick at some point. The market's caught up, but even still, I think he's fine in the 6th round. He's not like a smash like he was in the 8th round, but he's still fine in the 6th round. And it's hard to look at Brandon Aiyuk's profile last year and really pinpoint what the hell went wrong. It just sucks, man, because the doghouse thing just really did put a damper in everything. He got put in the doghouse, which I still don't even know. I don't know how Kyle Shanahan is just putting grown men in a doghouse. Like, it's insane to me. Like what is he, like a 5'10" skinny white guy putting like grown ass wide receivers in doghouses and making things personal and stuff. I don't know. To me that really rubs me the wrong way. I'm sure the same thing happened for Brandon Aiyuk, but it doesn't really matter. He saw from weeks 1 through 8 no action. Kyle Shanahan gave him doghouse treatment, which is the craziest thing I've ever heard of in the NFL, being put in the doghouse. It's not like he was a running back who fumbled or anything. He was just I really couldn't even tell you what it was. But then from weeks 9 and on, he saw a 90% target share at the very least in all of those games from week 9 on. And then he was sort of back to sort of himself, where he was the wide receiver 21 in points per game from weeks 9 on. He averaged about 13 points per game. So I think now, wide receiver 35 price, that's fine. And this is a guy who I'm pretty certain is talented. He had an 80-plus PFF grade in year 1. Again, PFF grade is really, really strong in terms of spotting breakouts, where the only guys to hit 80-plus PFF grades are all studs. Michael Thomas, OBJ, Keenan Allen, Tyreek Hill, A.J. Brown, Justin Jefferson, Terry McLaurin. I believe Ja'Marr Chase did it last year. Just straight hit after hit. And Aiyuk is also in that cohort. And when we look at his year 3 comps in my database in the RS grading system, it takes into account his prospect profile and then what he did in year 1, year 2, and spits out what his comps look like. Now, he does have some downside, right? He has Eddie Royal in his outcomes. He has Donnie Avery in his outcomes. But Keenan Allen and Deebo Samuel are both really strong comps, where he could be either one of those guys, where Keenan Allen had a great year 1, same thing with Deebo Samuel, and then year 2, they both came out and were flat, whether that was from injury or weird circumstances. And I think you can pencil Aiyuk's doghouse situation as similar to that, and then they come out in year 3 and are great. And I think Aiyuk has that in his range. And I also think that this quarterback change is really, really important for Brandon Aiyuk, where he goes for Jimmy Garoppolo, who's more of that Teddy Bridgewater, only throws what's open, low ADOT, to Trey Lance, who's going to be more of a Josh Allen, or let's not say Josh Allen, let's say like a Jameis Winston, where I'm not saying he's going to throw as many picks as Jameis Winston, but he's much more open to throwing the ball deep, throwing into tight windows, and that's perfect for Aiyuk, especially throwing the ball downfield. Because I took last year, 2021, now I know I know Trey Lance didn't have a ton of starts, but when we take 2021 ADOTs into account, Aiyuk was at 10.4, Trey Lance 10.3, Debo 8.6, Garoppolo 7.8. So when we sort of match things up here, Aiyuk is a much better fit with Trey Lance than he was with Jimmy Garoppolo. So this is going to play to his strengths. He's going to get more 50-50 balls. He's going to be playing as this true X wide receiver downfield. He's going to have, there were spots last year where he'd just cook a cornerback deep. He'd get open, and then he'd be like, this isn't coming to me. Jimmy's not going to get it to me, or he's going to miss this throw. That's not there with Trey Lance. He is going to have upside for some monster games if Trey Lance can connect with him, like we've seen him connect with a guy like Danny Gray in the preseason. I think we're going to see a couple long bombs to Aiyuk in 2022. Now, the last guy we're going to talk about, and I didn't mean for this to go as long as it has, but I want this to be a really thorough breakdown of 7 wide receivers that I'm very high on in terms of breakout wide receivers. And the last guy we'll talk about here is Kadarius Toney. And his ADP is 708 as the wide receiver 41. He is my 608 as my wide receiver 36. And admittedly, Toney is the biggest upside swing here with virtually no floor. There is no floor here. It's on record. The availability is a concern. He only played 10 games last year, and a lot of the games he did play were low snap shares and nursing some kind of injury. He already has knee, hamstring injuries. There's all kinds of things going on with Kadarius Toney. But when we just zoom in on the talent, he was electric last year. On a per-route basis, he has maybe one of the craziest rookie seasons of all time, just on a per-route basis. Last year, he was tied for 5th in targets per route run at 27.04%. He was tied with Deontay Johnson, only behind Antonio Brown, Cooper Kupp, Devontae Adams, A.J. Brown. Or no, Antonio Brown is also in there. I don't know how many of those I said twice, but you get it. He was in the top 5. Only elite studs were ahead of him. He's an absolute target hog when healthy and on the field. And that showed in his game in Week 5 against the Cowboys. If you're not a believer of Kadarius Toney, fire that game up. On only a 58.7% snap share, he commanded 13 targets, 10 catches, 189 yards on only 23 routes. That's like a 50% target per out run, which is insane. He had 29.6 PPR points without a single touchdown on Giants offense as a true rookie. Showing the ability to command targets like that this early is really promising, and then he also showed the ability to have efficiency on those targets despite a lower ADOT out of the slot and a bad offense. So the fact that he could remain efficient on those targets really says something. Where we saw a guy like Jaylen Waddle, he commanded a lot of targets, but he wasn't efficient even in what I would call probably a better offense than the Giants last year with a better quarterback. And when we look at Kadarius Toney, he had a 2.14 yards per out run, 11th in the NFL. He was second among rookies in yards per out run last year. He was 8th over the last 10 years among rookie wide receivers in yards per out run. Oh, didn't mean to pull that up. That is pretty crazy. This is a great stat by Jared Smola, where you have Martavis Bryant in first, isn't great, but you have Odell Beckham, A.J. Brown, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Tyreek Hill, rookie Juju Smith-Schuster, all in that same breath, which is really, really good. He has a really strong foundation heading into year 2. Again, the floor isn't there, but when we're talking about a guy you can draft in the 7th round as a guy who doesn't even have to start in week 1, he's a worthwhile swing. I'm also extremely excited for this new look Giants team. I want as many pieces as possible from this offense. It's going to be one of the league leaders in neutral pass rate. They're going to pass the ball. They're going to introduce some pre-snap motion, just a bunch of stuff that Jason Garrett doesn't even know about, right? They're going to have some modern concepts, some more 11 personnel. It's going to be really, really good. Now, again, Toney, I love his upside swing, home run type archetype. We know wide receivers take big jumps in year 2. All of Toney's per route data suggests he fits the part. All we need is for him to be on the field, and we've also gotten a lot of negative reviews on Kenny Golladay. I think Toney is probably the target or the favorite to lead the team in targets this year. Again, just comes down to availability. I'm open to betting on that, but he's not for the faint of heart. Now, that is going to do it for us today, fellas. If you want to make sure that you are drafting these players in your drafts at the right point and the right time, make sure to check out the Patreon, patreon.com/Ron Stewart. It'll be down below in the description. It'll be down below in the comments. It is my full rankings. I am old school. You guys will see I draft teams live on the channel. By the way, you guys have been killing those. We hit our record last night of like 400 people in the live stream at one time, which is just insane. Like my previous record was like 200. We doubled that last night. And I am old school. I crossed them right off. I would make these rankings regardless if I even had this channel. I always make rankings. And even if you don't want to copy them word for word, I think they're a really good foundation to then look at and then make your own rankings. So if you want what I go into every draft with, I update it once a week. Make sure to check out Patreon, patreon.com/Ron Stewart. I have my top 200 PPR and half PPR rankings on there. I have my, on top of that, I help you out in season. You get my waiver wire guidance article. You get my weekly rest of season rankings. You get my weekly rankings, all of that, fantasy advice, dynasty rankings, all of that good stuff, all for just $8 on Patreon, patreon.com/Ron Stewart. That is going to do it for us today, fellas. If you enjoyed at any point, make sure down below, subscribe, leave a like, and I will see you guys in the next one.
I got the juice, I got the juice.
Channel, Chatham's on. Foolies glad I'm home. Even my haters kinda glad I'm on. Rest in peace to my vagabond. Rapper, song, singer, suspended, subpoena from Mr. Me.